Franchising is the most misunderstood and most overlooked form of entrepreneurship. We're here to educate you and help you find the entrepreneur within. Franchising is not all about the French fries.
We find that individuals who are exploring business ownership tend to have a lot of misperceptions and misunderstandings about the franchise industry. So what we want to do is help prospective business owners make confident and educated decisions before moving forward or not moving forward with a business. Welcome to Unpredicted Entrepreneur.
Hello and welcome to episode 77 of Unpredicted Entrepreneur. My name is Sarah Wasco. I am joined by my colleague Roxanne Rapsky. We're with FranNet of Dallas, Fort Worth, and Oklahoma. And we created this podcast to bring you information and insight regarding business ownership and specifically franchising. We are thrilled today to welcome our guest, Gina Campbell. Gina is co-owner with her husband, Jeff Campbell, of Stand Strong Fencing in Argyle. Welcome to Unpredicted Entrepreneur, Gina.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We are thrilled to have you. Jeff was going to be here. Jeff is busy, and so we're very excited that their business is ramping up. They opened their business in April, I believe it was. Is that correct?
April.
Okay. So really, we just kind of want to start. I always enjoy kind of hearing the backstory and having you share that backstory of how you came to business ownership. You have a media background. Jeff has a background in media. You guys, it was a little bit humorous, and I remember this specifically when I first started speaking with you. Jeff was employed.
Yes.
And I kind of came to the table with some ideas that potentially would be owner-operator, or some might be semi-absentee. At the time we had spoken on the phone, he wasn't sure what the next step was, but knew he was ready to leave his job. But by the time we met in my office, he said, well, I quit my job.
He was ready. Yes,
okay.
He was ready. That's for sure. 100%.
So give us a little background story just on, what kind of led you to this entrepreneurship path?
Well, Jeff had been a director of sales for various television stations here in Dallas and, of course, in Houston. And we moved up here. He had gotten a different job. He was really kind of getting tired of the daily grind of corporate world, and he really wanted to own a business. Plus, we kind of looked at it, we're in our 50s, so we kind of looked at it as something that we could do, and then later on, it would be a little bit of a passive type income for us later on, closer to, retirement. So the opportunity presented itself that he was able to leave and start something new, and so we just decided to take the leap.
Awesome. And so interestingly, I know when he and I first had started speaking, y'all had looked into franchising a couple times in the past when you were in Houston.
Yes.
And the timing just wasn't right.
Correct.
And
I wanted to move back to Dallas. I had lived here before, and I wanted to be closer to my family there in Oklahoma. So my mother was sick and has since passed, and it was time for us to move up here. So if we were going to start a business, I really wanted it to be somewhere where we wanted to stay. And I was never really in love with that city. So we were, happy to be back and thrilled to have this opportunity to start a business.
Yeah. I just think sometimes the timing just it presents itself. And so it's great that you recognize that and decided to take the initiative to really begin this process when you had settled here, were comfortable here, knew you wanted to raise your family here. And then Jeff was ready to make that change.
Yes.
So I specifically remember, and there's a couple of things too that I want to point out. You had been a stay-at-home mom. You had exited your career when your children were born, and you were supportive of him. And this was something your kids are getting a little bit older and y'all had wanted to do together.
Yes, we wanted to vote. I had also been in media sales. So I worked at various stations here in Dallas and then in Houston. And then I left when we had our boys. And I have since done marketing for my dad. But for the most part, I've focused on raising our boys. So they're older now, they're teenagers. And this gives me an opportunity to still work with Jeff and, in the business owner capacity without having to be, behind a desk every day myself. I don't want to do that. And I should say, I come from a long line of my family's own businesses. So to me, that's not really foreign taking over and running a business. I've watched my family do it for my entire life.
What kind of businesses were your family in?
My dad ran our drugstore, which was my grandfather was a pharmacist. He had 2 drugstores, and it got passed down. And so that was in our family for many, many years. My sister owned a business. So I watched her, when her kids were older, she had a business. My dad has another business now. He's retired. He's an absentee owner, but he has a business up on Grand Lake in Oklahoma. So I help him with marketing in that capacity. And then he had some other businesses on the side. So he was always busy.
So another one with entrepreneurship in her blood.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. We hear that a lot. And I love the fact that that was ingrained in you at an early age, and you were willing to step up and do that with Jeff. And I love that you really pointed out, I think a lot of women who've been home with their kids want to get back in the workforce, but don't want to be beholden to certain hours.
No. Especially at my age. I mean, I'm not old by any stretch, but I am in my early 50s, and I don't have any desire to go on lunches and dinners and all that sort of thing. That's in the past for me. So.
Well, and I'm sure you still want flexibility.
I do.
Right? You
I
have
need
teenagers that are going to need you from time to time. And
I mean, one of your sons is a swimmer, right?
Well, he's actually running cross country now. He's moved past that. But yeah, and then our other son plays travel basketball. So we're busy with that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we have, our parents are a little older. So Jeff and I are kind of in that season of our lives.
The sandwich generation.
Correct.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely.
We've both been there.
Been there, done that.
Yeah. Yeah. So this gives you the flexibility. And I love that you both had marketing skills. You brought that to the table. I mean, Jeff, both of you media sales, and he owns a fence business. So we talk a lot about not needing industry experience.
Yeah.
I know we looked back, and he had looked at 8 different businesses along the way, which is quite a bit, usually more than what most of our clients do look at.
Yeah. But he was specific, though, about what he was looking for or what you guys were looking for. And I found his insight interesting.
Right. And he shared, and I know that you would agree, that he really felt like he needed those comparisons to get to a confident
He's super analytical. So for him, he needed everything laid out. Yeah. He had spreadsheets and charts, and he was on the phone with just about everyone you can imagine, asking questions. And I think it boiled down to like a roofing company.
Yes.
I remember.
Yes.
And he was really leaning towards that. And we looked at the glass company.
Yes.
He was really leaning towards roofing. And then you came back, because you would come back with another option.
What happened was, and this has happened in the past too, where a new brand was added to our inventory.
Right.
And when I was learning about it, it was obviously Stand Strong. I thought, oh, okay, maybe this could be a fit for Jeff and Gina. And so it was at that point I was like, okay, I don't want to muddy the water, but I need to make you aware of this opportunity. And so then y'all agreed to have that conversation, and then it kind of evolved from there.
Yes.
And to your point about him being analytical, I mean, obviously some people are more analytical than others, but he was saying that he felt like for 3 to 4 weeks, this due diligence was a full-time job.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I would call, what are you doing? Well, I'm talking to this other roofing. I mean, it was like he was looking at 2 roofers, and then of course we thought about the glass. We had a lot of time and thought into that. But then when you brought up the fence, it just, for me, I'm like, oh, well, that's what we need to do. I mean, I think the roofing company, I think they required a build out maybe, or an office space.
It was more expensive. I remember it was a bigger investment. And he made the comment that the biggest investment in this one was the truck.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Which was a lot more feasible or comfortable, I would say. But I really want to kind of go back and focus on the amount of time.
Yeah.
We get a lot of clients that want to own a business, but they don't understand the time required to do proper due diligence. And we always say, expect to invest at least 10 to 20 hours a week. So if you're struggling to just meet with us for an hour or 2 hours, it's going to be really hard for you to do proper research, right? So,
for sure.
So hearing it from you, the client, that how daunting it can be. It's a big job for a while until you kind of get it narrowed down and start maybe just looking at 2 instead of 4, right?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, it was, he would sit in there and he would be on calls. He would talk to different people. He would try to find out all the information he could before we actually settled on it. But it's kind of funny because when we first met with you, and I think this is true, I never would have thought going in the very first day it was going to be, we're going to do a fence company. Because I think you think about what you like and what you're interested in, and then that's what you want to do. And then it turns into, okay, that's really not, what you really need to do is what, works out with your skill sets and, putting it all on paper and comparing it and looking at it.
The business is really the widget that's going to give you the lifestyle and the income that you're looking for. Yes. And I think you have to go through those mental gymnastics of talking to all those other companies and making all those comparisons and learning all those details until and the other thing that was really important that he mentioned was he wanted something that he felt was needs-based.
Yes.
Right? With all the new construction going on. And I'm one of those people. When we bought our house out in Lucas, an acre and a quarter wide open, and we have a dog, right? So that was an expensive fence.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. So it was needs-based, and I know we kind of went round and around with the glass company and his evaluation of whether or not he felt like it was as needs-oriented maybe as some of the other businesses. But, just kind of back to the time, I was just like, we were just chatting about sometimes if a client asks us to meet on a weekend, like in an initial meeting or even a consultation, that's a red flag for us because it's not that, we have to manage our own time and set boundaries, but it's not as much even about that as it is an indication that if you're not able to find time during regular business hours to spend an hour to maybe an hour and a half with us for us to get to know you and try to understand some opportunities that could be a fit, you're really going to struggle to be able to do your due diligence in the franchise research process.
Yes, I would agree with that for sure.
Yeah.
You got to put a lot of effort into it and to make sure it's the right fit. You don't want to get into something and then discover that it's just not the right.
You picked wrong because you didn't invest the time up front.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then that kind of goes back to your point of being surprised at the opportunities that were presented because you kind of tend to migrate to what you think you like or what you think you might be good at. And that unfortunately is where some people make mistakes.
Yeah. And I didn't really ever think about that until, we started looking at them because things that I would think that we would have wanted weren't necessarily what looked good on paper. And then obviously now you see it in action. It's much different than,
Well, and just for a little plug, kind of going back to the fact that you're here and Jeff's not, he has 3 jobs today, right?
He does.
That's exciting.
We're wrapping up a job and then he's starting 2 more. So it's been pretty busy. We had a windstorm back in May, so that kind of kick things into gear for us.
I thought about y'all actually starting in April, and then I was like, oh, Jeff and Gina, that we had storms. Maybe this helps,
So absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk about that. In terms of Jeff being busy, having 3 jobs today, what do you attribute? You're doing a lot of the marketing for the company, and we were chatting with him about how you guys are going about kind of getting your leads. So share some of that with us. As far as your followers, you're way ahead of schedule on your social media.
We are. I really ran an engagement campaign on Facebook. Most of the interaction we get is from Facebook rather than Instagram.
Okay.
I found, of course, people like looking at reels. So whenever we do a job, I try to put something together and post it. And sometimes I boost it just to get, a lot more, clicks. That's been fairly successful, I think. I post a lot as a consumer myself and as someone who has been at home and, been in the home sector, whatever you want to call it. I'm usually the one that has to deal with people. Yeah. And where do I go? I go to my neighborhood Facebook group and I look to see, hey, who has a plumber? Who has an electrician? Whatever I need for recommendations. Well, I like to post in there, like in our neighborhood. I like to put jobs that we've completed in our neighborhood and post those so people can see that we did work. Hey, we're residents and, we're here. So I've just really been trying to focus on areas, surrounding areas, not necessarily in our neighborhood, but other smaller areas that are in our territory and get into their neighborhood groups and post. And we've gotten quite a few leads from that. So yeah, it's pretty exciting.
It's wonderful.
That's very exciting. And, of course, you have a marketing background, so you're probably a little bit more dialed into doing some of that than somebody that doesn't have that kind of a background, right? But there's a perfect example of not knowing anything about fencing, but you can take your skill set and still support Jeff and
Right.
support your business in the way that matches you, right?
You know what it reminds me of? This is kind of funny, but it reminds me of the movie Mr. Mom. If you remember that?
Yes.
And she goes back to work and she's going into advertising and she knows what, she knows what the consumer wants because she's the consumer. Well, I'm kind of the same way. I'm always like, well, you need to kind of, even selling, I know what I like when someone comes to my house. I just want them to give me the estimate, tell me, and move along. Not everybody's like that. But
Right.
I have an idea of what I look for. When someone's coming out, I have an idea of what I look for, where I go looking for my sources to get someone to come out. And that's kind of what I do. I go to where I would go because 9 times out of the 10, it's the woman at home looking it
Yes.
up. And so even a fence, or a roofer.
I do all that for our house, tree trimming, all of it. So question for you though, because I look a lot on the Nextdoor app. So do you do anything on the Nextdoor app?
I haven't done anything on the Nextdoor app.
Y'all should.
Yeah.
I look for a
get
lot
on
of stuff
Nextdoor.
there. Yeah.
Mhm. A lot of people are asking. In fact, I've referred you in Grapevine when people were asking for a fence
okay.
company.
That's
so
good to know.
that would be something I would encourage. And I really want to point out something that just in terms of what you were just saying about the consumer and what you look for as a consumer. I think it's really important for any stay-at-home mom to be listening. I think a lot of times people who've been home with their kids maybe assume that, oh, well, I've been out of the workforce for a long time. Maybe I don't have the skills to run a business. You are a perfect example of somebody that took what you learned being a consumer, having contractors need to come to your house or what have you, and transferred that mindset and that skill set and that knowledge into providing a superior customer experience for your client. So I just feel that that's something I really want to put out there because there's a lot of, I shouldn't assume it's all women, but mostly women that have been a stay-at-home parent.
Right.
Kids are getting older. They're starting to get a little bored. Or maybe they have this burning desire to do something, but don't want to go back to corporate like what we already talked about, but yet fear trying to start something on their own because they've been out of the workforce. So I really feel that, you've been a great partner. Jeff's been kind of probably doing more of the operations side of the business, and you're handling the marketing side.
Well, and just taking that a little bit further, I think when you've been out of the workforce for a while, you do kind of maybe feel like you've lost your edge a little bit. But I was out for 2 years just trying to get my own business started when I switched careers because I was part of the whole mortgage banking debacle. So I had to restart over, and I was at home, not because I wanted to be, but it wasn't my choice. I was looking for my next thing and working on it. But I even felt that way after a couple of years. But I think a lot of women or the stay-at-home parent, you're excellent project managers. So not just your consumer experience, but you've been running the house, right? You're getting the kids to wherever they need to be. You're handling all the stuff that needs to be done for the house. A lot of times you're paying the bills. So you've got so many organizational skill sets that transfer really well into owning a business. So I think it's important to point that out too.
Yes.
I refer to that as just being a project manager. It's just in a different way.
Yep.
All that multitasking pays
Right.
off.
Unpaid.
Getting everything done, getting it done on time, making
Right.
sure it's all happening. Those are a lot of balls up in the air.
Yes,
Yeah.
they are. And Jeff's he's project managing right now. He's got a lot of them, but absolutely. It's all part of it. And, I was at home, I think maybe 6 or 7 years. And then my dad's like, you want to just run my social media? And I was like, sure. And so when I want to test something out, a lot of times I do it with his business. I test it out, see how it goes. I'm like, okay, I'm going to bring it back to ours now.
What kind of business is his business
He
now?
has a discount store.
A discount
Yep,
store.
up on the lake in Grove, Oklahoma. So
Okay. We had someone else today that his grandfather and father opened a discount store on, was it a lake or a river?
In Iowa.
Yeah.
I think on a river.
On a river.
Yeah.
What's it with discount stores on the water?
it's a unique niche because you've got people from Tulsa who all have these big lake homes. Then you have other people who are just looking for a good deal. It's a discount store. And so there's not really much out there. There's a Walmart or something,
Yeah.
down the road in Joplin or wherever it is. I think there's one closer, but for the most part, there's just not that much there. So they actually get a lot of things. I do some buying for them as well. So I buy merchandise. So
cool.
it's actually fun for me.
That's
so
awesome.
I can buy.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's really great.
so I do a little bit of that.
So you guys are 3 months in now.
Yes.
What are some of the big lessons you've learned or any aha moments? I'm sure
That's probably more really of a Jeff question. I mean, I know like we were talking last night and he was a little overwhelmed and I'm like, listen, you've got so many things going on, like you were saying, balls in the air. You've got contractors, you've got people who want to know if someone's running late or a job gets pushed. And, it's like I told Jeff, from my perspective, again, as the consumer, just keep them in the loop. For the most part, if you are honest and just tell someone you're going to be running a day behind, people are going to appreciate that. Even if they wanted it to start yesterday, they're going to be more appreciative if you just tell them straight up, look, we're running behind. This crew is here. And so just keep them informed. And, it's kind of a learning curve, just getting used to the crews, and they all have, different people running them. And, it's a lot of different things. And then the suppliers, you've got different relationships at different suppliers. And so, it's just getting used to how they all work and knowing that you need to be there early if you need the job to start early, because otherwise if they don't show up at 7:30 and they show up at 9, you may not get your materials until 11. So there's just a lot of little things like that. And that pushes your job and that pushes the crew and that pushes their job the next day. So, you just got to make sure everybody knows, make sure the supplies are ready, make sure you've talked to the manager there and they've got everything ready to go. It's a lot of different things. So
it's like drinking through a fire hose, and he's in the grind right now.
And
he's
you
in
have
the thick of it.
No control over it except what you can do, and that's to make sure everybody knows their responsibility and when things are supposed to happen. But again, you just got to keep the customer, the client, whatever you want to call them, you've got to keep them informed. That's how I always look at it.
That is the best advice. And again, kind of comes from you being a consumer, because people do understand the most irritating part is when they expect you and they don't hear from you and then you don't show up.
Right.
Yeah. So we'd all much rather hear, hey, I'm a day late, it's going to be tomorrow, than stand around at home waiting and nobody ever shows up.
And that comes from my sales background too. I mean, I always wanted to make sure that my clients were taken care of and they knew the situation and they were informed. So,
And I know one of the things that was appealing was the fact that it's subcontractors. So you're not, if you do have a lull or a slower time, you're not having those employees kind of hanging around without work.
Correct.
But then on the other hand, you are having to your point, maybe adjust to the different crews, and because you're just getting started, learning their styles and learning how to work with each one.
Right.
So,
and for Jeff, when you start working with these different crews, you have the ones that you see how they work and you want to see how their, the job looks and make sure it's up to standard, which it has been. We haven't had any issues, but you're almost interviewing them when they are doing a job, because you want to make sure, you're putting your name on that. So,
And y'all were one of the first handfuls of franchisees, one of the first few franchisees, right?
Correct.
So you didn't have a lot to learn. There's some advantages and disadvantages to being what we call an early adapter. You got the exact territory you wanted, which was great.
Yes.
But by the same token, you didn't have a lot of franchisees to learn from.
And we didn't have the brand recognition. That's been a challenge, I mean, we have to get our name out there and we want to represent the brand a certain way. And that's been tough. But, I mean, you're as good as your word. Your integrity is everything. Yeah. And so you just get out there and network and make the most of it and do a great job. So,
and you get those jobs, and then you get those referrals and that trust. And he had shared with us that there was a big fence company in your area that most people kind of would turn to. And now they're starting to refer you.
Yes. Yeah. So that's been great. We've used a lot of networking groups in our area to meet a lot of realtors and insurance agents and roofers. And so, we refer them, they refer us. And so that's been one of our avenues.
Well, and a couple of things Jeff said that I liked and wanted to point out, because that is a real struggle in this market. Things sell out so quickly, meaning franchise opportunities disappear because everyone's gobbling them up so quickly. So a lot of times you do have to go with an emerging brand where there's not a lot of brand recognition to be able to get the territory you want. But the cool thing for you guys was, I think that 2 other franchisees came on at the same time you did, went through the academy together. So the three of them have kind of been able to lean on each other a little bit, which has been helpful.
Yes, and they've had several. I think they've had 2 or 3 meetings. They tried to do it once a week, but they're too busy for that now. But Greater Frisco and then a section of North Dallas, they get together. Jeff gets together with those guys. So
that's nice because he's got support. They don't look at each other as competitors. They look at each other as I'm not saying adversaries. What's the word I'm looking for? But they're almost like partners in crime. They're there to help him. They're not competitors. They're all trying to help each other and make it work and grow the brand in the market. The other thing that Jeff said that I really liked is he said, always do the right thing. And he was talking about making the choice between doing the right thing or making a buck, and feels that doing the right thing, it's going to come back to you in positive ways.
Yes.
So,
and it may not be financially rewarding at the time you make that decision.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
for sure. I mean, that's like you're taking some of the smaller jobs, repair jobs early on, just to get our name out there. I know Jeff went out and repaired some fences for people, just gates and little things, and he didn't charge them. Just, don't worry about it. Just if you know of anyone that needs a fence, if you need a fence next time, just give us a call.
Right.
So, I mean, we're not trying to, upcharge anything or nickel and dime anyone. We would rather just do something that we can to help you. And then in return, please refer us.
Yeah.
So
getting your name out in the community.
Very smart. And it takes time, and everybody gets frustrated because it takes longer than what they want or what they expect. But those things that you're doing, just all the little things add up to bigger things, and people will and do remember that.
Yes.
So if somebody on that subject needed a fence, how would they find Stand Strong Fencing of Argyle?
Well, we're on Facebook and we are on Instagram, and it's Stand Strong Fencing of Argyle. And we're also just our web address, Stand Strong Fencing. I think it's argyletexas.com. You can just type it in, Stand Strong Fencing of Argyle, in Google, Yahoo, whatever you use, and it'll come up. Our number is 940-412-1412, and give us a call.
Great. Well, if y'all need a fence, you know who to call with all the storms around here.
Right.
Thank you for joining us today. If you're listening in, we appreciate you listening. Please look for Sarah and I on LinkedIn. We're very active there. I'm Roxanne Rapske, Rapske, Sarah Waskow, Waskow. You can learn more about FranNet and what we do at frannet.com. You can also watch our podcast on YouTube at FranNet of Dallas, Fort Worth, and Oklahoma. And we're also on all of the podcasting platforms. Thanks again, Gina. We appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.